Good morning, everybody. I just wanted to come to you guys and talk a little bit about the basics of fasting. Our church is currently about halfway through a week of prayer and fasting, and I just wanted to go over all the different types of fasting and kind of some of the implications of fasting. And so here's a few of the different types of fasting. There's intermediate fasting, which is typically about 10 to 16 hours of not eating food. Then there's the 5-2 method, which is basically fasting 2 days a week and eating regularly 5 days a week. There's also what's called the 16-8 method, which is just fasting for 16 hours and eating for 8 hours. There's also some people who fast every other day, which is pretty intense to me. But also there are 24-hour fasts. I mean, you can do all the way up to like 30-day fasts and 40-day fasts. I've never personally completed one, mostly just because of my health. But there's also water fasting and juice fasting. Some people will drink coffee during their fast. Some people will avoid coffee during their fast. I think it's personally better for tea to be doing that during fasting. But a lot of people typically will do like a 1 to 3 day water fast is very typical. But also there are other types of fast besides food. You can fast social media or entertainment. You can do what's called the silence fast, basically just not talking for, an extended period of time. But also I've heard of within the silence fast, people not defending themselves and, still, doing regular talking and communication, but they won't defend themselves or even attempt to during that fast, which is interesting and powerful. There's also what's called the warrior fast, which is eating one large meal a day, typically towards the end of the day, but that's just preference. There's also fasting 1 or 2 meals a day. Some people don't think of this often, but you can just fast like 1 meal a day, and that's fasting. There's also the Daniel fast, which is basically just eating vegetables and drinking water. I also just wanted to point out something that I kind of thought about fasting. I thought God had to move, or I had to have some sort of breakthrough in fasting, and I figured out that that's not really true. A biblical example is 2 Samuel 12, where King David fasts for his child. He didn't know whether God would let the child live or die, and so David fasted, and the child ended up dying. And as soon as he figured out the child was dead, he went up and took a shower, changed, and ate some food with his friends. But he basically said, how was I supposed to know if God was going to be compassionate or not? So I fasted for the child. And I guess I was under the misconception that, if I was doing a fast, that, God had to break through or move the way I wanted. And it's not necessarily the case. Typically in fasting, you're positioning yourself to receive more from God. And fasting isn't even always a spiritual practice. it can come from a place of health and just needing to just not eat. It kind of helps your body to reset in a sense. And but fasting can be very spiritual. It aligns your spiritual desires and emotions with your physical body. It sorry. It can give you more time to engage in spiritual activities and just kind of really help your mind get right. Jesus implied that his disciples would fast when he was gone, and early Christians fasted 1 to 2 days a week, typically as a spiritual discipline. And not just Christians fast, there's a lot of religion, and like I said, even non-religious people who fast for medical reasons. But it can be a very healthy thing. I've heard that your cells can regenerate quicker when fasting, and that if you do a 3-day fast, it can really help your body to just reacclimate to its normal processes. But yeah, anyway, fasting can sound really easy, but you can get brain fog and you can really feel on edge when you're missing your food, and can tend to be irritable and a little bit more emotional and sensitive to the spirit and in the natural. But basically, with fasting, you hit barriers, and prolonged fasting can be a really healthy thing. I've never personally done more than I think a 3 or 4 day fast just because of my health. I tend to start losing weight really quick, and I don't have a lot of weight to lose right now, so kind of just being practical, listening to my body, and being reasonable and logical. But basically, people with autoimmune diseases like Crohn's probably shouldn't do prolonged fasting. That's just my opinion. I don't personally do more than a 1 or 2 day water fast. Typically I'll try and do a lot of bone broth and nutritional dense things while I'm fasting, just to make sure that my body doesn't get triggered into a flare-up or bring some inflammation. So a couple things just in closing. I'd say start small. Start with a meal or a day of fasting. See how it goes. See what your body's telling you. Plan your time accordingly, because when you're fasting, you typically have more time. You're not eating. You're not preparing food or thinking about what you're going to eat. So plan your time accordingly, because you will have more time on your hands. And it's typically best to engage in spiritual activities during the fast, especially, being a spiritual being, as we all are. Just focus your time. Make sure you don't get obsessed or overwhelmed with the idea of needing or wanting food. And also be mindful, because, maybe you have a weekly lunch date with your grandma or aunt or friend. Just let them know that, hey, I'm gonna miss this week, I'm fasting. Maybe don't tell them you're fasting. Jesus says to not tell people that you're fasting. It's in the Sermon on the Mount, but basically God will reward you openly for what you do in secret. So you shouldn't just go around being like, oh, hey, I'm fasting. I think he actually rebukes people because they were fasting with sackcloth and ashes on their head and kind of making it a more public thing. And he was like, hey, this is a more private spiritual thing, so do that. And lastly, Try different methods. Like I said, there's media fast, silence fast. There's multiple different methods of fasting food or water or both. I've even heard of people fasting water for more than 3 days, and it's just completely supernatural. And I've never personally tried it, but I know close friends who have and are doing it and experiencing God in incredible ways. So, yeah, I would encourage you to just go seek God and how to fast and get more spiritual, because the Bible says to desire to be spiritual. It actually says desire the spiritual gifts, but the word gifts isn't in there, so it literally says desire to be spiritual. So feel free to ask any questions or leave me some comments on what you guys think about the video or fasting in general. I would love that, and you guys have a blessed day.